Hello everyone, my name is Joseph Cho. I am a graduate student at Penn State studying agricultural and extension education with a dual title in international ag and development. So a group of researchers, including myself, have conducted this research on a structured international experience program that took place in Malaysia pre-COVID. Three of the researchers that are listed here, Dr. Noah Foster, Dr. Kinsinger, and Dr. Foster have actually went to the program and had that experience and collected data, whereas the other three, we investigated the research afterwards. So the title of the research is as seen here. Okay, the agenda is as follows. I'll first talk about how we came about conducting this research. Next, we'll be introducing the purpose of the study. Then providing a brief summary of how the experience was like. And talk about the theoretical framework that constituted the research, and then the method that we utilized to conduct the research, the result of the research, as well as finishing off with the conclusion. So, as we all know, international and globalization are two key words that have become more familiar and critical both socially and professionally. Specifically talking about the workplace. Globally competent workers are highly demanded because of their ability and knowledge to work in diverse settings with diverse people. One of the more prominent sites to develop these globally competent people, human resources, are in the academic institutions. In universities, students go on these international experiences or study abroad experiences to develop these competencies. And the experience helped the students gain language skills, some of the competencies that you see here on the second bullet here. However, and there have been other studies in the past that have looked at some of the benefits and impacts of immersive experiences abroad and in other forms of international experience. And also studies have experienced or investigated the impact that it has on the host side of things, so the people who are actually in that specific country of the experience. However, the studies have looked at the experiences of the host through the lens of the people who actually went there, so the students. So the experience itself doesn't show the whole story, especially from the host side of things. Our studies stem from this notion that we wanted to investigate the perceptions and the experience from both the host and the guest side. So the purpose of the study, our research team tried to describe and compare the structured reflection responses between the US and the Malaysian participants during a 4-week professional development experience in Malaysia. I have some photos throughout the slides, as you see here on this one. And these are the photos that were taken during those the immersive experience. Providing a little background, the international immersive experience that our team investigated was called Ag Ed to Malaysia. It was a 4-week-long structured experience that took place pre-pandemic, where the US participants visited Malaysia. The three research team members were the facilitators and the overseers of the experience. There were preparation phase before going to the trip so that the students didn't go in blind without knowing some of those languages or etiquettes that might be very important while they're there. The goals of the program were to increase global competence, learn the intersections of culture, education, and agriculture of the two nations, as well as experiencing secondary education in Malaysia. Actually, forgot something. So the program itself had 6 pre-service, 6 in-service US agricultural educators, as well as 8 pre-service Malaysian life skill education teachers. But for this research, we only investigated the 6 pre-service US educators and the 8 Malaysian life skill education teachers to compare apples to apples. I want to emphasize that in this photo this was taken from the airport right before the US participants actually landed. And since this picture was taken, the Malaysian participants dormed with the US participants, they ate with them, and they were part of the program 24/7. So one thing that I want to emphasize for this particular program is that they were not tour guides. They were actual participants that partook on all of the programs that the US participants were part of. So talking a little bit about the theoretical framework that was created based on this study was Mesro's transformative learning theory. Our research team viewed the internationally immersive experience as the event or events, since there were multiple things that were going on throughout the experience that proceeded to transform the participants. This was the perfect theoretical framework for our study because Mesro's transformative learning theory states that the events don't have to always be dramatic events. They can be incremental events, which was for the case of the Malaysian participants. Some of the common and ordinary things that they experienced, but they could, through self-reflections, they kind of got those transformative learning experience. For US, it was more of a dramatic experience since they were at a different scenery altogether. The method that we used to collect the data was through a daily reflective tool called TIPS Journal. And TIPS is an acronym, the acronym that stands for Things, Ideas, People, and Self. In short, all the participants had to write a one thing that stood out the most, one idea that made them pause or think, one person who left a strong impression, and reflecting on themselves for that particular day. This was a template that the participants used. With the data collection that we collected, we created themes for each category, and the inner color reliability was used to create and validate these codes and themes. First, one person from the research team created a code book with definitions and rules on how the coding came about. I have the actual code book that was used here. If anyone wants to come, I don't know if with the COVID situation I want to pass it around, but if anyone wants to take a look at it afterwards, you guys are welcome to do so. So for the second step, two other research members went through 10% of the entries randomly selected, and they went and through the guide of the code book, they coded some of those entries. Next, the results of the three researchers were compared with at least 90% alignment with the coding and themes that were created through the entries. If this goal was not met, the members discussed and addressed the issues and went back to step 2 to redo the process again until they got the 90% alignment. After the codes and themes were finalized, the frequencies of each of the themes were counted, and this was done so that we can rank the themes based on the frequencies, but also to compare and contrast the experience of the two participants, the Malaysian and the US participants. And this was done through a chi-square test. This is an example of the tips category that was used. So the examples of the entries on the right side of the slide, they were coded to make the themes on the second column, and then those themes were part of the categories that were used for the categorizing of the tips. Just so that we're all on the same page, categories are the tips, the things, ideas, people, and self, and the themes are the codes that represent the entries in groups that you can see on the second column. There were a lot of themes that came about, and I won't go through all of them, but these are the themes that were created. The dark greens represent, so the dark greens, I don't know if you guys can see the distinguishing colors, but on the left side are the dark green ones that represent the US participants, and the right side are the Malaysian participants' The results shown on this and the next 3 slides are listed in the order of the themes from the highest frequency to the lowest frequency from the left side to the right side of the US participants. The 3 top most frequently occurring themes are highlighted on each of the slides, and you can see it here. I won't go through all of them, but for things, the most frequently occurring themes were agriculture, environment, and conservation, and education, which was also same for the Malaysian participants. And the results showed a significant difference between the Malaysian and the US participants for the themes of religion, hygiene, and health. Same thing here, the most frequently occurring themes for the ideas category for both the US and the Malaysian participants were teach ag best practices, community and culture, and agriculture. The themes that showed a significant difference between the 2 participating groups were community and culture, education related, and religion. This one was a little different in terms of the people. The most frequently occurring themes for the US participants were Malaysian life skill students, UTN personnel, and agricultural personnel. UTN was the university that collaborated and helped with the immersive experience and where the Malaysian students were from. For the Malaysian participants, it was the US in service and the total US participants and participant group as a whole. The themes that had significant differences between the 2 groups are shown on the right side. For self, there were only 4 categories, or 4 themes. It was global competency, education aspects, agricultural aspects, and others. And again, similar in terms of the rankings of the themes that were created for both the Malaysian and the US participants, and the significant differences of the themes that for the US and the Malaysian participants are shown there. So in conclusion, this experience impacted both groups, both the US and the Malaysian participants. It's no surprise to find some of these experiences were common and ordinary for the Malaysian participants, but new for the US participants. For example, Malaysia is predominantly Muslim, and religion is a huge portion of their culture. Now, with US having different aspects of religion, practices, and perceptions, this comes to no surprise that it was new for the US participants, but something that's ordinary for the Malaysian participants. What was surprising was that US participants and Malaysian participants had similar insightful and eye-opening experiences. So for example, the themes in agriculture and environment related, as well as the themes related to teaching practice experiences, were both high in frequencies for both the US and the Malaysian participants. Something that I mentioned with the results, the people category. We found that the groups were interacting and impacting each other, which was very nice and meaningful. Compared to the things and ideas and self category, the 2 participants actually interacted and impacted each other's experience through the immersive experience. And it also showed with evidence that it had the most significant differences with the themes category. So we found out that the experiences were, they impacted each other, and that was in and of itself an experience through the immersive experience. These self-reflections help understand the experience of both the US and the Malaysian participants. And again, what we understood above all was that the host and the guest can both benefit from an immersive experience, even if it is international, for some and not for others. Our research does not imply that international experience like this or study abroad experiences are useless. Rather, we want to imply that benefits can be procured through different ways and methods benefiting diverse populations, both domestically and internationally. This is just one experience that our research team investigated, and further investigation is required to make improvements and look at the benefits of global learning, which is probably necessary post-COVID, and how that is impacted. I do have some flyers up in the top, and I can, if you guys are interested in learning more about global learning and global agriculture, we have a community where a lot of the similar people who are interested in global agriculture and global learning have come to one space to discuss and share their experiences and how they teach stuff at their own settings. So if you guys are interested in that opportunity, I have some flyers that I can share out with you guys. Other than that, thank you for listening to the presentation.
Okay, as I said before, we have about 5 minutes for questions. I'll open the floor and let you guys drive this, but I have a few of my own. But of course, you guys first, please. And discussion, general questions, whatever you like.
Thank you for that presentation. I love that we often forget the host part of it. And my experience is more on like the service learning side and like getting the community partners' perspectives as well as the students involved. I was curious if, I mean, obviously the pandemic has disrupted a lot, but is there any effort or intention to bring a group to Pennsylvania to give them that cultural experience?
So this was through a global Teach Ag network, and the program itself is an organization that is embedded in the Penn State program. There have been students that came to experience the U.S. culture and the U.S. agriculture.
From that group?
Not this
okay,
group
okay.
in particular. There was one participant from this experience that came to the U.S. to look at some of the things that are going on in the U.S., met with the U.S. participants in U.S. and went through some of the classrooms and looked at some of the cultural aspects. We haven't investigated how that impacted their life and their experience, so that might be something that we can investigate going further. Yes.
So I'll actually jump on that. So I hosted that student that came over.
Oh,
so
wow.
He student taught with me for 2 months. So he lived with me, and like I had to make a little bed in my living room and like host him. And so like he and I, so I was the person that was sticking out in the back of some of those pictures, like a foot taller than everybody else. But yeah, I look ridiculous back then. A lot of people thought I played NFL football. And yeah, I told them it. So I connected really closely with a couple of the male students in that group because there was only a handful of them compared to the rest. And so the one student who's Zaimi and I hit it off pretty well. And so a year later, I found some funding and bought him a plane ticket. And he came over for 2 months and student taught with me. And it actually aligned pretty nicely because then the next year he did his formal student teaching back in Malaysia. So he got to meet all my students and teach a couple classes. And I've got a whole gang of stories how that went. It was good, but a lot of learning still took place when he came back over here. So then since going back, he's infused a little bit of that into his teaching, but there are some differences in the styles that they run class versus us. So he did glean a little bit of it back, but it was very cool to see that. And then I took some notes as like his cooperating teacher, like, all right, here's what I'm seeing and here's what I'm comparing back to what I saw in Malaysia. But I think we would probably need a pretty sizable group of those teachers then to compare and actually get some data. That's kind of just some anecdotal evidence for now.
Cool. Thank you.
Yep.
Okay, we have time for probably one more question. So we can...
I have one. I'm really curious for you as the researcher who was analyzing this data but not having been a part of the experience. How was that for you? Like finding those codes and drawing those conclusions, and what was that like?
It was fun and difficult at the same time because I haven't had that experience. Like it was just something that I heard, right? It's something not that I saw. So it was hard to imagine, but also like reading a book, you kind of see some of those entries and you kind of imagine some of the things that they went through, both the US and the Malaysian counterparts. So it was interesting in that aspect. Maybe I might have had a different lens if I was there and looking at the entries, but some of the things that came up, like they visited pineapple farms, and I've never been to a pineapple farm, so I can only imagine. And through the words that they have entered, some of those things that came up, and it was an experience, I guess, not directly but indirectly from their eyes.
Interesting. Anyone else? Oh, yeah.
I had a quick follow-up question to that. Was there any video footage, or like, you know, anything like that that was a different?
Not that I saw, but there might have been some students that could have taken videos, photos on their own that was not investigated with our research.
Okay, one more round of applause.